The legislation before us today is a big deal for American families and a big deal for our planet.
For decades, corporate special interests and their out-of-touch friends in the Republican Party have blocked progress in Washington. They got what was good for the rich and powerful, not what was right for working families and the middle class. No more. That time is over.
The Inflation Reduction Act will lower energy costs, confront the climate crisis with the fierce urgency of now, set our planet forward on a sustainable trajectory, lower healthcare costs by strengthening the Affordable Care Act, as well as reducing the deficit by $300 billion and giving Medicare the ability to use its bulk price purchasing power to drive down the high cost of life-saving prescription drugs. It's a big effing deal.
For decades, politicians talked about capping the amount of money seniors pay every year on prescription drugs.
When my Republican colleagues were in the majority, they used their control over this body to pass tax cuts for the wealthy and deny health care to millions of Americans.
We are doing the opposite.
For too long, the price of life-saving prescription drugs has bankrupted American families.
The Inflation Reduction Act will allow Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices with pharmaceutical companies. The cost to seniors per year will not exceed $2,000.
It caps the price of insulin at $35 for Americans on Medicare.
It breaks Big Pharma's monopoly on prescription drug prices.
Not to mention what the monthly cap on insulin price will do for millions of others.
Finally allows Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices.
This will be the biggest improvement in Medicare since the inception of Part D almost 20 years ago.
This is a real progress that provides real relief to seniors.
No one should have to choose between whether to take their medicine or put food on their table.
For too long, Congress has refused to act while seniors, like my mom who's a breast cancer survivor, endured price gouging on their medicines while on Medicare. Today, Democrats in Congress are changing that.
My mom is diabetic, and I remember going with my grandmother where she would inject insulin into herself, and sometimes she had trouble paying for it and spent days and sometimes several days at the hospital.
This legislation is also for my grandmother, Alice Jones, who worked well past the age of retirement just to pay for the high cost of prescription drugs and medical procedures.
In 2018, I was at a home in a retirement community along the Jersey Shore. A gentleman pulls me aside and in a whispered voice shared with me that he pays over $500 a month for prescription drugs and couldn't keep up.
It's time to take care of our seniors.
This legislation will make a real difference in reducing costs for working families.
The bill extends the American Rescue Plan's reduction in the cost of insurance under the Affordable Care Act, which has helped us reach the lowest number of uninsured people ever.
Like Rod Yearwood in West Hartford, Connecticut, who is paying $1,400 a month for his insurance, and now under this bill is paying $20 a month.
Those reflect some of our basic needs.
This transformational legislation will lower healthcare costs for millions of Americans.
This act includes historic climate change legislation, will lower prescription drug costs, reduce the cost of Medicare.
Today, we put people over politics as we lessen the impact of global inflation on the American people.
It's not about the wealthy, the well-connected, and the well-off. It's about people who believe, like many of us, that we've gone too far without lowering the cost of medicine for everyday people.
This historic bill puts people over politics by lowering the cost of living, like health care, creating good-paying jobs, and ensuring that the wealthy and corporations pay their fair share of taxes.
Extreme weather events are becoming more frequent and more extreme. Record high temperatures across the nation this summer, and these extreme weather events cost families, their loved ones, their homes, and their livelihoods.
It is time for us to take this climate crisis seriously, and that's exactly what this bill does.
The future we will all share, Democrats and Republicans.
This is the largest investment in clean energy and climate solutions ever in U.S. history.
We will show true leadership to the world that we are taking action.
All while creating millions of well-paying jobs across America.
If you build pipelines, this bill is for you because of the increased money for carbon capture and hydrogen. If you make the steel tube that goes into those pipelines, if you work at a nuclear power plant or you build things for the nuclear power plant, this bill is for all of you.
We are going to build things. On top of the infrastructure bill and the CHIPS Act, we're going to build electric vehicles, electric cars, electric tractors, batteries, solar, wind. We are going to rebuild the middle class.
We make good on our promise to take on climate change and climate justice with historic investments in green technologies that will cut carbon emissions by 40% by 2030.
The bill provides additional tax support to manufacturing projects located in energy communities, including those that previously housed coal power plants.
U.S. companies will be able to create great-paying jobs and lead the clean technology revolution.
Bringing greater investments to rural America
and create more good-paying union jobs.
Our utilities support it, it's good for our economy, and it's good for our environment.
And make it more affordable for families to purchase energy and cost-saving products like electric vehicles and solar panels.
Ensure that the United States remains the global leader in energy production and in energy innovation and technology.
A historic investment of $3 billion to electrify the Postal Service delivery fleet.
Today, we're going to prove them wrong. We're going to remind them what the United States is capable of. We are about to pass the most impactful climate bill ever.
It's bringing jobs home, strengthening our supply chain, and reducing our dependency on foreign manufacturing.
Electric vehicles in Michigan, not in China.
There was a time when the Republicans used to work with us on that. They have chosen to move in the opposite direction to their shame.
A new generation of Americans are calling on Congress to act on our nation's biggest challenges.
They say, Dr. Schreier, can't you do something about climate? And here's the answer.
And I want to thank the young people all across this country who pushed us to take this historic step.
The most historic climate legislation in the history of this nation, in the history of the world.
There's nothing that could be more significant than this legislation.
We are putting people over politics. People over politics. That's what Democrats are about. Today we are delivering.
This is a historic win for family pocketbooks, for Americans' health, and for the future of climate security. And we fund these gains by ensuring that large, profitable companies pay their fair share.
No new taxes on families. That is crucial.
Invest in workers without raising taxes on families and small businesses.
Fully paid for by requiring the biggest corporations and the ultra-wealthy to pay their fair share.
This legislation is also the largest down payment and deficit reduction since I've served in Congress.
Not once has a Republican-led Congress brought a reconciliation bill to the floor that was paid for, let alone reduces the national deficit.
5 years ago, Republicans passed a $2 trillion tax scam for the rich and the corporate tycoons.
So it's up to Democrats to clean up that mess. It will actually reduce the deficit by preventing tax avoidance for the biggest corporations in this country, require them to shoulder their fair burden of the tax responsibility.
And protecting families making less than $400,000 a year from paying even 1 penny more in taxes.
You know what? Our constituents have to pay their fair share. These rich people ought to be able to pay their fair share as well.
My constituents have been waiting for too long for their refunds. Added staff, it's going to expedite the services that the IRS and the American people need from the IRS.
We promised we would make progress on the issues where progress has been stalled for far too long.
It is a resounding victory for America's families starting at their kitchen table.
Let me remind my Republican colleagues what they are voting against. They're voting against cutting prescription drug prices for their constituents, in many cases for life-saving medication. Voting against combating inflation and lowering energy costs when American families are desperate for us to take action. And they're voting against providing the largest federal investment ever to combat the climate crisis and its life-threatening consequences.
The Republicans' plan is to do nothing. In contrast, we in the Democratic majority will lead.
With or without Republican support today, we will make a real difference. We will use the power of the federal government to make American lives better and our country and planet safer. In other words, we will do our job.